Welcome to Martha Family Secrets. She looked straight into the microphone, her voice smooth as polished marble, and said it loud enough for every single person in that room to hear. Remove her. She has no business being here. 200 people. My father's retirement party. And my father, standing just 3 steps away in his perfectly pressed tuxedo, stared at the floor and said absolutely nothing. Nothing. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I walked out of that ballroom with my back straight and my mother's pearl earrings catching the light one last time. And within 47 minutes, I had moved $17 million into a trust my stepmother never knew existed. 56 missed calls. And by the time I made myself a cup of tea, my entire family was standing at my front door. But they weren't there to apologize. Oh no. They were there because a legal document, one my mother had signed long before she took her last breath, had just collapsed 20 years of my stepmother's very careful planning. Ha! 20 years. And it unraveled in 47 minutes. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Sophie Caldwell. I am 34 years old. And this is the night I finally stopped making myself small. Let me take you back. All the way back. My father is James Caldwell. If you've ever driven through the suburbs north of the city and noticed those sleek glass and steel office buildings that seem to pop up every few years, there is a very good chance his name is somewhere on the permits. Commercial real estate. That was his world. 35 years of buying land, raising buildings, and shaking hands with men whose watches cost more than most people's annual salaries. He announced his retirement the spring I turned 34, and the whole town reacted like a head of state was stepping down. But that empire, that glossy, successful empire, had a foundation most people never saw. My mother, Eleanor Hale, died when I was 11 years old. Ovarian cancer. 8 months from the day of the diagnosis to the day we stood at her grave. And then she was gone. Just like that. Like someone had blown out a candle in the middle of dinner. Weeping. What I remember most isn't the hospital. It isn't the silence in the house after. What I remember is the kitchen table. My mother sitting across from me with a roll of craft paper and a set of drafting pencils, teaching me how to draw floor plans. She would sketch the bones of a building, the load-bearing walls, the joists, the hidden geometry that held everything together, and she would say, quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. See, Sophie? Everything beautiful starts with structure. I didn't know then that she was a licensed architect. Nobody ever told me. That detail got buried, along with so much else about who she really was. 8 months after her funeral, 8 months, my father sat across from me at that same kitchen table while I was drawing a floor plan from memory, and he said, "You're going to have a new mother, sweetheart." I was 11 years old. I didn't know how to say I don't want a new one. So I said nothing. That was the first time I chose silence. It would not be the last. Let me tell you about Vivian. Vivian Cole, soon to be Vivian Caldwell, was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and rearrange it without touching a single piece of furniture. She did it with tone. With timing. With the particular skill of making every command sound like a kindness and every insult sound like a concerned observation. She wore designer labels the way other women wore their skin, naturally, constantly, as if it had always been there. Her hair was always perfect. Her smile was always measured. In 23 years, I never once saw Vivian Caldwell look unprepared. I should have understood, even then, what that meant. Within a year of the wedding, the Thanksgiving seating chart changed. I went from sitting beside my father to sitting at the smaller table in the sunroom. You're so much more comfortable away from the crowd, aren't you, Sophie? By year 3, the family Christmas card featured Vivian, my father, and Cassandra, Vivian's daughter from her first marriage, born just 2 years after me. I was told the photographer had run out of time before my solo shots. By year 5, my bedroom had become Vivian's home office. My things were boxed and moved to the guest room. You'll be leaving for college soon anyway, she said. No point wasting the space. Vivian introduced Cassandra to people as our daughter. She introduced me as James's daughter from before. As if I were a rough draft my father had long since revised. I became a restoration architect. If you're not sure what that means, that's okay, most people aren't, including my own family. I restore old buildings. Not the glamorous kind. Not city penthouses or beachfront estates. I work on the forgotten ones. A crumbling public library in the Hudson Valley. A 19th-century firehouse in the Catskills. A schoolhouse with a collapsed roof and 100 years of stories still living in its walls. I strip away the decay. I find the original bones. I bring them back. It is painstaking. It is physical. Some days I'm covered in plaster dust and crawling through attic spaces with a flashlight between my teeth. I earn a perfectly decent living. But in the Caldwell world, where Cassandra's latest brand partnership was worth more in a single Instagram post than I made in 2 months, my career was a punchline at every dinner table. Last Christmas, at the family dinner I was grudgingly invited to, Cassandra announced her newest collaboration while Vivian practically glowed with pride. When the table turned to me, Vivian tilted her head just slightly, just enough, and said, "And Sophie, have you found anything more stable yet?" As if I were still job hunting. As if restoration architecture were a gap year that had somehow stretched into a decade. My father looked at his plate. He always looked at his plate. What none of them knew, what I hadn't told a single person, was that 6 weeks before that dinner, the Historic Preservation Society had awarded me their highest honor for a library project I had spent 3 years restoring. I didn't tell them. I had stopped sharing good news with people whose only talent was shrinking it. But that library, that crumbling old building I had poured myself into, would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. Okay, I need a second right before we go further. If you are watching this and you have ever sat at the smaller table, literally or in every way that matters, drop a comment below. Just say, small table. You'd be surprised how many of us have been there. And stay with me, because what happens next with that library, it changes everything. 11 months before the retirement party, I was on the floor of my Brooklyn apartment sorting through a box I hadn't opened in years. It was my mother's box. A battered cardboard thing I had carried from the family house to my college dorm to my first apartment and finally here, a third-floor brownstone walk-up with creaky floors and the most beautiful morning light. Inside, her leather-bound notebook. A few of her drafting pencils. A photograph of her standing in front of a half-built house, sawdust in her hair, the biggest grin I had ever seen on her face. And at the very bottom, beneath a stack of old birthday cards, a sealed envelope I had never noticed before. Cream paper. Heavy stock. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, that slanted, confident script I would recognize in the dark, 4 words. For Sophie. When she's ready. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of her personal letterhead. And that is when I stopped breathing. Eleanor Hale. E.H., Hale Architecture and Preservation. My mother had been a licensed architect. She had run her own firm. And not a single person, not my father, not Vivian, not one human being in 23 years, had ever told me. Below the letterhead, in that same careful, slanting hand. My darling girl. There are things about our family's money I need you to understand. I've made arrangements to protect what is yours. Mr. Hartley has everything. Find him. Tucked behind the letter was a business card. Daniel Hartley, Esquire. Trusts and Estates. I sat on my apartment floor for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. Daniel Hartley was 67 years old and still practicing. His office was 12 subway stops from my front door. I wrote him an email with my full name and 4 sentences. My mother was Eleanor Hale Caldwell. She left me a letter. She told me to find you. When can I come? He replied in 2 hours. The subject line read, I have been waiting for this email for 23 years, Miss Caldwell. Oh. He said he had a document I needed to see. He said it could only be discussed in person. He asked how soon I could come. I went the next morning. But before I tell you what Daniel Hartley showed me in that office, before I tell you about the $17 million, the legal document my mother signed while she was still fighting for her life, and the amendment my stepmother had been quietly drafting for months, I need you to understand something about my father. Because James Caldwell was not a villain. And that, in many ways, made it so much worse. Part 2 is coming. And it is the part where everything starts to crack. My father was not a villain. I want you to hold that for a moment before I keep going, because I've thought about it more than I'd like to admit. A villain you can hate simply. You can draw a clean line between yourself and them and walk away. My father was something far more complicated. He was a man who loved me but did not have the courage to show it whenever showing it cost him something. I have one memory I return to more than any other. I was 14. He picked me up from school on a Tuesday for no reason at all. Just showed up and drove me across town to where a beautiful old stone building was being torn down. We sat in the car and watched the wrecking ball swing. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Your mother would have fought to save that building." It was the last time he ever said her name. After that, Eleanor Hale Caldwell became a ghost in her own house. Her photographs disappeared from the hallways. Her books were boxed. Her name was replaced by Vivian's in every sentence, every tradition, every toast. And my father let it happen. One eraser at a time. Because Vivian's tears were always louder than my silence. I'm pausing here because I know some of you are nodding right now. The parent who loved you but kept choosing peace over protection. Drop a heart in the comments if you know exactly what that feels like. Keep going. It gets real. Daniel Hartley's office was on the 14th floor of a pre-war building on Madison Avenue. The elevator was slow. The hallway was dim. The door was solid oak with a brass nameplate that had not been updated since the 90s. Inside, it looked exactly as you would imagine a trust attorney's office would look if he had been practicing for 40 years and saw absolutely no reason to redecorate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Leather-bound volumes of estate law. A mahogany desk buried under neatly stacked files. And on the wall behind his chair, a framed photograph of my mother. Younger than I had ever seen her. Standing in front of a building with a hard hat and a grin. Hartley was silver-haired and deliberate. He spoke the way careful lawyers speak, every sentence weighed before it was released. "Your mother retained me in 2003, he said, when she first received the diagnosis. She wanted to ensure that her assets, specifically the inheritance she brought into the marriage from the Hale family, would be protected for you." He placed a document on the desk between us. 40 pages. Leather-bound. My mother's signature in blue ink on the final page. The trust agreement of 2004. He explained it to me in plain language, because my mother had asked him to do exactly that, 23 years in advance. Eleanor Hale had entered the marriage with $17 million in inherited family wealth. That money was placed into the Caldwell family trust, but with a critical legal distinction. It was designated as segregated funds. Walled off. Legally separate from the rest of the trust, even though it sat in the same account. Your mother signed an amendment in 2006, Hartley continued, sliding a second document forward. 6 months before she passed. It designated you, Sophie Eleanor Caldwell, as the sole beneficiary of the segregated funds, effective upon your 30th birthday. No co-signatures required. No trustee approval needed. I stared at the page. My mother's handwriting in the margin, "For my girl." Weeping. "Does my father know about this?" I asked. Hartley paused. The kind of pause that tells you the answer before the words arrive. "Your father was present when the original trust was established. He has always known." The air left the room. And Vivian? Mrs. Caldwell? Was never informed. She appears to believe the entire 42 million in the trust belongs to the family generally. He folded his hands. She has been contacting our firm and the fiduciary manager requesting access to the trust provisions. The fiduciary correctly declined. 42 million in the trust. 17 million of it, my mother's. Walled off. Protected. Waiting for me. For 4 years past when it was already legally mine. What happens, I said slowly, if I withdraw? The remaining 25 million won't cover the loans Mrs. Caldwell authorized using the full 42 million as collateral. The bank will issue a margin call. I sat with that for a long time. I'm not going to sign today, I told him. Give me until after the retirement party. I want to see if my father chooses me. Hartley looked at the photograph of my mother on the wall. Then back at me. Your mother, he said quietly, would understand. 3 weeks before the party, I called my father. I wanted coffee. Just the two of us. He said yes, immediately, and for half a second, something warm moved through me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Then my phone rang 10 minutes later. Vivian's voice. Your father's schedule is very full right now, Sophie. Perhaps after the party. A week later, the invitation arrived. Gold foil lettering on heavy cardstock. Celebrating 35 years of excellence, James Caldwell. Hosted by Vivian Caldwell and Cassandra Caldwell. My name had been printed as Sophie Caldwell Cole. Cole. Vivian's maiden name. Hyphenated onto mine. Like a brand. Ha! What a piece of work. 3 weeks out from the party, Vivian began building her stage. I noticed the first move on a Monday. I'd sent a message to the family group chat, something small, asking what time we were expected at the venue. The message sat there, delivered but unanswered for 3 days. On Thursday I texted Cassandra separately. Is the family chat broken? She replied 4 hours later. Oh, Mom made a new one. Must have been a glitch. There was no glitch. There is never a glitch with Vivian. I called the event coordinator at the Whitmore Hotel, a woman named Janelle. I gave my name and confirmed my RSVP. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, I don't have Caldwell on the guest list. Could you be a +1? The floor shifted beneath me. Not surprise. Recognition. I had seen this pattern before. The slow, mechanical precision of being disappeared. I called Vivian directly. She picked up on the second ring, because Vivian never wanted to seem like she was avoiding you. Sophie, what a surprise. I wasn't sure you'd come, given everything. A pause. Heavy. Loaded. But please don't wear one of your work outfits. This is black tie. She would have someone add my name, she said. How generous of her. 2 weeks before the party, I drove out to my father's house in Westchester to give him his retirement gift early. I wanted to see him without all the noise. Just father and daughter. I had spent 3 months restoring an original architectural rendering of the very first commercial property he had ever purchased, back in 1989. I had tracked down the blueprint from the county archive, stabilized the paper, reframed it in reclaimed walnut. It was, I thought, the kind of gift that said, I see who you were before all of this. My father opened it in the living room. His eyes went soft. His fingers hovered over the glass. For a moment, he was somewhere else, somewhere before the gold foil and the Chanel tweed and Vivian's careful management of every room he walked into. Sophie, he started. And then Vivian appeared in the doorway. She glanced at the framed rendering the way you would glance at a child's finger painting. That's sweet, Sophie, but the walls are already full. Cassandra commissioned a portrait of your father. Oil on canvas. By an actual artist. My father set my gift down on a side table. He didn't fight for it. He never fought for anything that was mine. Vivian guided him toward the kitchen. I stood alone in the living room. Above the fireplace hung the portrait. My father in a leather chair. Vivian standing behind him, one hand on his shoulder. Cassandra at his side. No empty space. No room for anyone else. I was turning to leave when I heard Vivian's voice from behind the kitchen door, low and fast. She's going to make a scene at the party, James. You know how she is. She'll bring up her mother and ruin everything. Maybe we should prepare security. My father's reply was barely audible. She's my daughter, Vivian. And Vivian's response, perfectly clear. Exactly. And daughters should know their place. I left through the front door. But as I passed Vivian's study, I saw it on her desk. A manila folder. A law firm logo I didn't recognize. And the words printed across the tab. Trust Amendment Draft. I didn't stop. I didn't open it. But I saw it. And I remembered. 1 week before the party, I had lunch with a woman named Margaret Ellis. She had been my mother's closest friend, one of the very few people who still said Eleanor's name out loud and naturally, as if she were a real person and not a footnote. We sat at the same French bistro my mother used to take me to for Sunday brunch when I was small. White tablecloths. Copper pots on the walls. A waiter who still remembered that Eleanor ordered the croque madame every time. I ordered the same. Margaret was quieter than usual. She kept rearranging her silverware. Finally, halfway through her second glass, she said it. Sophie, is it true you were let go from your job? I put my fork down. Who told you that? Vivian. At the garden club last week. She said you've been struggling. No stable income. Relying on your father. Margaret paused. She called you, she said, the cold daughter. Said the family has been trying to help but you won't accept it. Oh. I was not fired. I had not relied on my father for a single dollar since the day I left for college. And my mental health, while certainly tested by 23 years of Vivian Caldwell, was not a topic I had discussed with anyone in that garden club. Vivian was building a story. She was seeding it into every circle that mattered, so that when the retirement party arrived, everyone would already believe the narrative. Sophie Caldwell is unstable. Uninvited. Unwelcome. So that when she was removed, no one would question it. Margaret reached across the table and took my hand. I didn't believe her, Sophie. Your mother was the strongest woman I ever knew. And you are her daughter. Something inside me that had been bending for a very long time finally stopped bending. And started straightening. The night before the party, I sat alone in my apartment and I made a decision. Not a desperate one. Not an angry one. A quiet to deliberate one, the way my mother made every decision that mattered. I laid out my dress. I put on her pearl earrings. And I called Daniel Hartley. Part 3, the party, is next. And I promise you, you are not ready for what happened in that ballroom. The Whitmore Hotel on a Saturday evening in October is the kind of place that makes you feel underdressed even in your very best. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars. Italian marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Waitstaff in black tie carrying silver trays of champagne that caught the light like liquid gold. The grand ballroom had been transformed, white Belgian linen, white hydrangeas, pale gold roses, a live jazz quartet playing Cole Porter with the kind of quiet precision that only money can buy. 200 guests. Business partners. Golf friends. Westchester socialites. People whose last names appeared on hospital wings and university endowments. All of them milling and murmuring beneath a banner that read, "Cheers to James Caldwell. 35 years of building legacy." I gave my name at the reception table. The young woman checked her list. Scrolled. Checked again. Caldwell, Sophie? I'm sorry, I don't, oh. Wait. She pointed with her pen. Here. You were added yesterday. Yesterday. 200 guests confirmed months in advance. And I had been added yesterday. Squeezed into the margin like a last-minute correction.
Ha!
I should have expected nothing less. I walked in. The whispers came in waves. Not shouts. Not accusations. Just whispers, the kind that travel across a cocktail hour like a draft under a door. A cluster of women near the bar, glancing my way. That's the cold daughter. A man in a pinstriped suit leaning toward his wife. I heard she hasn't worked in months. A voice half hidden behind a centerpiece arrangement. She can't do anything right. Vivian says she just shows up and causes problems. Vivian's seeds. Blooming exactly on schedule. I kept my back straight. I kept walking. I scanned the room for my father and found him near the small stage at the far end of the ballroom, standing between Vivian and Cassandra, smiling for a photographer arranging them into a perfect family portrait. 3 people. Perfectly composed. Perfectly lit. The photographer snapped his frames. No one looked for me. No one called my name. And from the corner of my eye, I noticed 2 men in dark suits positioned near the ballroom entrance. Security earpieces. One of them glanced at Vivian. Then at me. And shifted his weight. They were already watching me. They had been told to watch me. I made my way across the ballroom. It is a strange thing, walking through a room full of people who have been primed to see you as a problem. Every smile felt like a flinch. Every turned shoulder felt deliberate. I reached the small circle around my father. James saw me first. His face did something complicated, a flicker of warmth, quickly followed by something that looked very much like panic. He opened his mouth. And then Vivian's hand was on his arm. Laura, he managed. Then, correcting himself, Sophie. Glad you could make it. 5 words. The same 5 words you would say to a colleague you barely recognized. Vivian turned to face me. Cream silk gown. Hair swept up. Diamonds at her throat. That particular smile she wore whenever she was about to draw blood. She pitched her voice just loud enough for the 15 people around us to hear every syllable. Sophie, what a surprise. I wasn't sure you'd come, given everything. She let the pause land. Then, softer, almost tender. Just don't make it about yourself, okay? Tonight is about family. Family. Ah. The word hit like a slap. Cassandra appeared at Vivian's elbow, fresh from somewhere, a new necklace catching the chandelier light. She looked at my dress with the specific kind of smile that is actually an inventory. Sophie, love the dress. Is that from last season? I let it pass. I looked at my father. Dad. Can I talk to you for a moment? Just us? Richard's, James's, eyes moved toward me. I saw it, the instinct. The flicker of yes. His body leaned half an inch in my direction. Then Vivian's hand tightened on his arm. James, the Hendersons are waiting. You can speak with Sophie later. Silk over steel. My father straightened. Looked at Vivian. Looked at me. And turned and walked toward the Hendersons. Are you feeling this? Because I was standing in the middle of 200 people and I have never felt more alone in my life. If you are watching this and your hands are clenched right now, same. Keep going. We are almost at the moment that changed everything. I stood alone in the center of that ballroom. An older woman I didn't recognize walked past, paused, and said to her companion, not quietly enough. Poor thing. Vivian told me she's been struggling. Such a shame. Her mother was wonderful. Her mother was wonderful. Yes. She was. And she left me something that no one in that room understood. The speeches began at 8:30. Vivian took the microphone first. Of course she did. She stood on that small stage in her cream silk gown and delivered a speech that was, by any measure, flawless. She thanked the guests. She praised James's 35 years of work. She called Cassandra up to the stage for an embrace that drew a collective warm sigh from 200 throats. She spoke about family. About loyalty. About the people who truly make a house a home. She did not say my name. She did not look at me. My mother's name was not mentioned once. When the applause faded, I stood up. I was not going to make a speech. I only wanted to walk to the front, hand my father a small velvet box, a brass compass I had spent weeks restoring, the same one my mother had given him when they were young and in love, engraved with her initials, and say something quiet. Something just for him. I was 10 steps from the stage when Vivian saw me coming. Her expression did not change. That is the thing I remember most. How absolutely controlled she was. She leaned into the microphone and in a voice as clear and calm as a dinner bell, she said. Security. The ballroom went still. The jazz quartet stopped mid-phrase. Even the bartender paused mid-pour. And then, every word precise, every syllable designed to carry to the very back of that room. Please remove this woman. She wasn't invited and she is causing a disruption. 200 people went silent. 200 heads turned. Every pair of eyes in that ballroom swiveled to me, standing alone in the center aisle, holding a small velvet box, wearing my mother's pearls. I looked at my father. James Caldwell was 3 steps from the microphone. 3 steps from his wife. 3 steps from his daughter. He looked at Vivian. He looked at me. And then he looked down at the floor. He said nothing. The 2 security guards materialized on either side of me. The one on my left spoke quietly. Ma'am. We've been asked to escort you out. The room watched. Some looked away. Some didn't. Cassandra, near the stage, had her phone up. Filming. She was filming her own sister being removed from their father's retirement party. Oh. I set the velvet box on the nearest table. Not threw it. Not slammed it. I placed it gently, the way you would set down something you loved and were leaving behind. Then I looked at my father one last time and said, not loudly, not with anger, just clearly enough for the people nearest to hear. I came for you, Dad. Not for her. But I see your choice. I turned. I walked toward the exit, back straight, eyes dry. My mother's pearl earrings catching the last of the chandelier light as I passed through the double doors. Behind me, I heard Vivian's voice return to the microphone. I'm so sorry about that, everyone. Now, where were we? The jazz quartet started up again before the doors had fully closed. The October air hit me like cold water. I sat down on the steps outside and I gave myself 60 seconds. 60 seconds to feel all of it. And then I stood up, walked to my car, opened my laptop on the passenger seat, and I made the phone call that would change everything. Part 4, you will want to see their faces when they realized what I had done. 60 seconds. I gave myself exactly 60 seconds, sitting on the marble steps of the Whitmore Hotel, my breath visible in the cold night air, the muffled sound of Cole Porter bleeding through the walls behind me. 60 seconds for 23 years. Then I stood up. Because my mother did not raise me to sit on other people's steps. I walked to my car. My 7-year-old Subaru Outback, parked quietly among the Teslas and the BMWs and Cassandra's leased Mercedes. I got in. I placed my laptop on the passenger seat. The screen lit the inside of the car in pale blue while the parking lot stretched dark and silent around me. Inside the building, 200 people were still dancing. Out here, it was just me, a Wi-Fi hotspot, and 23 years of silence finally reaching their limit. I dialed the conference call. Daniel Hartley picked up first. Then Rebecca Stone, the fiduciary manager. Hartley read the authorization code. 12 characters, calm and precise, as if he were reading a weather report. This authorizes the transfer of segregated funds from the Caldwell Family Trust to the Sophie Caldwell Irrevocable Trust, per the Trust Agreement of 2004 and Amendment of 2006. Rebecca confirmed receipt. Miss Caldwell, I'll need your digital signature on the document I'm sending now. My phone buzzed. I opened the email. Read every line, because my mother taught me that everything beautiful starts with structure, and I signed. Processing, Rebecca said. Estimated completion, 45 minutes. While I waited, I sat very still and thought about my mother. About a woman who, while fighting for her life, had sat down with a lawyer and a stack of legal paper and built a wall with it. Not in anger. Not in revenge. In love. In foresight. In the absolute certainty that one day, her daughter would need it. Weeping. At 9:47, Rebecca called back. Transfer complete. $17,422,316.78. The funds are in your trust, Miss Caldwell. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a moment and listened to my own breathing. Then I turned off my phone, started the engine, and drove home to Brooklyn. I want you to really picture this. 200 people still laughing and dancing and clinking glasses inside that building. And me, sitting alone in a parking lot, watching arithmetic do exactly what arithmetic does. Stay with me. Because the next 12 hours are something else entirely. When I turned my phone back on 40 minutes later, there were already 12 missed calls. By the time I reached my kitchen counter, 29. By the time I finished making chamomile tea, 56. Ha! 56 calls. They hadn't called me 56 times in the last 23 years combined. Here is what 56 calls sound like from the other end. At 9:52, 5 minutes after the transfer cleared, Cassandra tried to buy a round of drinks for her friends at the ballroom bar. Card declined. She laughed, embarrassed, pulled out a second card. Declined. A third. The bartender's smile went stiff. Cassandra's cheeks went red. At 9:58, Vivian's phone buzzed with a notification from the fiduciary firm. Bold letterhead. The word urgent in the subject line. Action required. Significant asset movement in Caldwell Family Trust. Please contact your account manager immediately. Vivian stepped away from the dance floor. She called Rebecca Stone directly. Rebecca, professional and neutral, said only, a beneficiary has exercised their legal right to withdraw segregated funds under the original trust agreement. I'm not authorized to disclose further details by phone. Margaret Ellis, who stayed through the end of that party and remembered everything, told me later that she watched the color drain from Vivian's face in real time. Like watching a screen go dark. First the smile. Then the composure. Then the certainty. All of it gone inside a single phone call. Vivian walked straight to James, gripped his arm, and pulled him to a corner near the coat check. What did you do? She hissed. James stared at her. What are you talking about? Vivian pulled up the trust portal on her phone. Her fingers were shaking. The account balance, which that morning had read $42 million, now read $24,957,000. And in the transaction log, one line. Segregated fund withdrawal. Beneficiary, Sophie E. Caldwell. James's face went gray. Vivian's champagne flute was still in her hand. She hadn't set it down since her speech. Her fingers were trembling around the stem. She can't do this. James, call her. Now. He called. I didn't answer. He called again. And again. And again. I was already home by then, sitting in my restored armchair in my Brooklyn apartment, a cup of chamomile cooling beside me, looking at the photograph of my mother on the wall. Eleanor Hale. 31 years old. Standing on a construction site with sawdust on her boots, laughing at something off camera. Alive. The phone kept lighting up and going dark. Vivian, you have no right. This is family money. Cassandra, my cards aren't working. Sophie, this isn't funny. James, Sophie. Please call me. We need to talk. Vivian again, I am calling our lawyer. You will regret this. I watched the screen and didn't answer. Instead, I ran a bath. I took off the midnight navy dress and hung it carefully. I unclipped my mother's pearl earrings and set them on the vanity. I stepped into the hot water and stayed there until my breathing slowed and the steam softened every edge. When I got out, I put on a sweater, made more tea, and sat with my mother's photograph. "I did what you asked, Mom," I said to the empty room. "I found him. And I found what you left for me." Then the intercom buzzed. I looked at the screen. All three of them. Standing on the stoop of my brownstone at 11:15 on a Saturday night in October. James in his tuxedo, tie loosened, face the color of wet concrete. Vivian still in her cream silk gown, mascara tracked in dark rivers down both cheeks, clutching her handbag like a life raft. Cassandra half a step behind, phone to her chest, eyes swollen and red. For 23 years, I had gone to them. To their house. Their dinners. Their terms. I had driven to Westchester and sat at the small table and smiled through every comment designed to shrink me. I had rung their doorbell like a guest in my own family. Now they were at mine. Ah. No, actually. Ha! I pressed the intercom button. "Come up." Vivian crossed my threshold, already drawing breath for whatever she had been rehearsing in the car. "How dare you?" I raised one hand. "Just enough." "You are at my door, Vivian. Lower your voice. Or leave." She stopped mid-word. It was, I believe, the first time in 23 years that anyone had said no to Vivian Caldwell on a doorstep. She looked at me as if I had spoken a language she didn't know I understood. "Come in," I said. "But I'll be the one talking tonight." They sat in my living room the way people sit in a waiting room when the news is already bad. James took the armchair by the window, the one I had reupholstered in olive linen myself last spring. He looked shrunken inside his tuxedo. Vivian stood. She refused to sit. Standing was control, and she was not ready to give that up. Cassandra perched on the edge of the sofa, arms crossed, phone clutched in both hands. Vivian fired first. "You stole from this family. That money belongs to your father." I opened the folder on my coffee table. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. "That money," I said, "never belonged to my father." I slid the trust agreement across the table. 40 pages. My mother's signature in blue ink. It belonged to my mother. Eleanor Hale Caldwell. Your predecessor. The room contracted. Vivian's eyes locked on the document like it was a weapon pointed at her chest. The trust agreement of 2004. Drafted by Daniel Hartley, executed by my mother before her illness progressed. It designates $17 million, her family inheritance, as legally segregated funds. Walled off. Mine. Vivian's voice came out thin. "That's fabricated. James, tell her." James was staring at the document. He didn't look up. He didn't deny it. The silence in that room was the loudest sound I had ever heard. "You knew," I said. Not a question. "Didn't you, Dad?" His throat moved. His hands tightened on the chair arms. "Your mother, she set it up before she got sick." I should have told you." Vivian turned to him as if she had been struck. "You knew?" His silence was his confession. 23 years of it. Finally audible. I placed the second document on the table. Amendment of 2006. Signed by my mother 6 months before she died. It names me as sole beneficiary. Effective on my 30th birthday. I'm 34. I exercised my legal right tonight. I sat back. I didn't steal anything, Vivian. I reclaimed what was always mine. Vivian read through every page. I watched her eyes scan, flip, search for the crack, the loophole, the mistake. She didn't find one. My mother had been meticulous. Hartley had been meticulous. 23 years of legal architecture, built to hold. When Vivian looked up, she had shifted tactics. The fury was gone. Replaced by something I had seen 100 times, the quiver in the chin, the careful widening of the eyes, the trembling hand pressed to her collarbone. Victim mode. Her most practiced performance. Richard, James, she breathed. She is tearing this family apart. After everything I have done. Speaking of what you've done, I said, I know about the draft amendment. The performance collapsed. Instantly. Her hand dropped. Her mouth opened. Then closed. 3 weeks ago, I was at the house. I saw the folder on your desk. A draft amendment from a law firm, designed to remove me as beneficiary and transfer my mother's money to Cassandra. Cassandra's head snapped up. What? I also confirmed with the fiduciary firm that you have been calling them repeatedly, requesting access to my mother's trust provisions. Access you have no legal standing to receive. Vivian abandoned the tears entirely. What replaced them was raw. Stripped of all the silk. So what? That money has been sitting there for 20 years. Cassandra deserves it more than you do. At least she contributes to this family. Mom. Stop. Cassandra's voice was small but sharp. A crack in a wall I had not expected. I looked at my sister. Then back at Vivian. Cassandra deserves what, exactly? $17 million that my mother earned, that my grandmother and grandfather built over 3 generations, because she posts photographs for handbag brands charged to a trust that isn't hers? James surfaced. Weak. Sophie, that's enough. I turned to him. I had been waiting for this. No, Dad. You don't get to say enough tonight. You lost that right when you watched 2 security guards walk me out of a ballroom and said nothing. The silence after that was different from all the others. It was the silence of a man hearing, for the first time, the true cost of his own cowardice. Then I reached into the folder and placed the last document on the table. The one I had been carrying since my meeting with Hartley. The one I hadn't shown anyone. It was an email. Printed on plain paper. Sent 6 months earlier from Vivian's personal account to her attorney, and accidentally copied to Daniel Hartley, whose address was still on file in the firm's system. I read it out loud. Every word. We need to move quickly before Sophie finds out about Eleanor's trust provisions. James doesn't have the spine to stop us. The room went airless. James reached for the printout. Read it once. Read it again. Then he set it down on the table and looked at his wife as if he were seeing her for the very first time. Vivian, he said. His voice was barely audible. Is this real? She didn't answer. Her face answered for her. That's not revenge, I said quietly. That's arithmetic. And that, I nodded at the email, is who she is. What happened next in that living room, what my father said, what Vivian did, and what Cassandra finally admitted to me, that is in part 5. And so is what happened 3 months later on a stage in Washington, D.C., when everything my mother built finally came to light. Stay with me. We are almost home. What happened next was the sound of a structure failing. Not all at once. Not the dramatic collapse you see in films. The slow kind. The kind I have witnessed in my work 100 times, when a building has been standing on a compromised foundation for decades and one day a single beam gives way and everything above it shifts. Vivian reached for the email printout as if taking it off the table could undo the words. James pulled it back. She pivoted. The chin quiver. The glistening eyes. The hand at the throat. She is manipulating you, James. Just like Eleanor always did. My father stood up. In 23 years, I had never seen James Caldwell stand up against Vivian Caldwell. He had yielded. He had deferred. He had looked at his plate and let his silence do the work of agreement. But something in those words, just like Eleanor, hit a wall inside him that even he didn't know was still standing. Don't, he said. His voice was shaking. But the words were stone. Say her name. Vivian stopped. Her mouth was open. No sound came out. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, she had no response ready, because she had never imagined she would need one. Weeping. Cassandra stood slowly from the sofa. Her face was blotchy and wet, but her voice was steadier than either of her parents. "Sophie," she said. "I waited. I didn't know. About the trust. The amendment. Any of it. I didn't know. I looked at my sister. The golden child. The one who had been handed everything I had been denied. And I saw beneath the designer jewelry and the tear-streaked makeup a 26-year-old woman standing in the wreckage of the only story she had ever been told about her own family. I believe you didn't know about the trust, Cassandra. But you knew what it felt like to watch your sister disappear from family photographs. You knew what it meant when I sat at the small table every Thanksgiving. You knew. And you said nothing." She closed her eyes. Nodded once. "My father took a step toward me. Sophie. I'm sorry." I let the words settle. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't okay. It hadn't been okay for 23 years, and pretending otherwise would be one more form of silence. "I know you are, Dad. But sorry isn't enough anymore. I need you to do something." He waited. "Four things. The 17 million stays in my trust. That is not negotiable. Vivian's draft amendment is destroyed and voided. I want notarized confirmation. You retain your own attorney, not hers, yours. And if you want a relationship with me, it will be on equal terms, with clear boundaries, and it will not go through her." I paused. "Those aren't punishments. They are the minimum conditions for me to trust you again." James looked at the documents on the table. At the email printout. At the velvet box he hadn't yet seen, the one I had left behind at the party. Then he looked at me. "Okay," he said quietly. Without negotiation. Vivian grabbed her bag. "This isn't over, Sophie. For me, it is." She left. Heels clicking down my staircase. The front door closed hard enough to rattle the glass. Cassandra lingered a moment longer. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find it. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Sophie." And followed her mother down the stairs. My father stayed. He sat back down in the olive armchair and stared at his hands. And neither of us spoke for a long time. The radiator hummed. The brownstones settled. My mother's photograph watched us from the wall. The fallout arrived in waves over the next 72 hours. Monday morning, the margin call came, a letter from the bank, bold letterhead, red urgent stamp. The Caldwell Family Trust was $13 million below the required collateral threshold. James had 60 days to inject additional capital or liquidate assets. 2 commercial properties would need to be sold. James hired his own attorney that same afternoon. A woman named Patricia Hall from a firm Vivian had never heard of. Patricia pulled the full financial records of the trust, something no one had done independently in over a decade. What she found was the second detonation. Over the past 15 years, Vivian had authorized approximately $2.3 million in withdrawals from the trust's operating account, categorized as family expenses. Patricia's audit revealed they were anything but. Personal shopping. First-class travel. Cassandra's lifestyle costs. A down payment on a vacation property titled solely in Vivian's name. None of it approved. None of it disclosed. Vivian was given a choice: repay the $2.3 million through a structured plan, or face civil liability and removal as co-trustee. The country club membership stayed frozen. The insurance policies lapsed. Cassandra's credit cards stayed dark. And 2 days after the margin call, Cassandra quietly deactivated her Instagram account. No announcement. No farewell post. Just a single story that read: "Taking some time offline. It was the first honest thing she had posted in years. 1 week after the party, my father called me himself. Not through Vivian. Not through a scheduling intermediary. He picked up the phone and dialed my number and asked if I would have coffee with him. We met at the French bistro my mother had loved. He was already seated when I arrived. He looked older, not in the gradual way that aging usually works, but in the sudden way, as if an entire decade had landed on him in 7 days. His collar was loose. His eyes were shadowed. On the table in front of him was the velvet box. I opened it, he said. The brass compass lay in his palm. I had spent weeks restoring it, cleaning the patina, repairing the hinge, polishing the case until my mother's engraved initials were legible again. E.H. Eleanor Hale. My mother had given it to him in their second year together, when he had told her he wanted to build things, and she had told him he needed to know which direction he was facing first. My father turned the compass over in his hands. The needle still worked, trembling, settling, pointing true. She was my compass, he said. Your mother. And I let someone else steer. He was crying. Quietly, the way men of his generation cry. Jaw tight. Eyes spilling. No sound. I hadn't seen him cry since her funeral, 23 years ago. I didn't say it was okay. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I said, I'm glad you're here, Dad. That's a start. He told me he had asked Vivian to move out of the house temporarily. Not a divorce, not yet, but space. He needed to understand what had happened to his life while he wasn't paying attention. We ordered coffee. And then, without planning it, we both ordered the crock madam. My mother's standing order. Every Sunday. At the same table. Neither of us mentioned it. We didn't need to. 2 weeks after the party, Vivian came to my door alone. No mascara this time. No silk gown. She wore a gray coat over a plain black dress, and her face was bare, no foundation, no concealer. Just the raw map of a 58-year-old woman who had not been sleeping. The Cartier bracelet was gone from her wrist. She had sold it, I learned later, to begin repaying the $2.3 million. She must have followed someone through the front door. I opened my apartment door and found her standing on my landing, arms at her sides. You've ruined everything I built, she said. Not angry. Not performed. The flattest, most honest thing Vivian Caldwell had ever said to me. I leaned against my doorframe. You built on someone else's foundation, Vivian. My mother's money. My mother's husband. Even my mother's daughter. You tried to erase me so you could keep the stage to yourself. She flinched. Not the theatrical flinch, the real one. The kind that happens in the muscles around the eyes before the brain can edit it. And then she said something I did not expect. I was terrified, Sophie. Every single day for 23 years, I was terrified you would show up one day and take it all away. Her voice cracked. And you did. I looked at her. I understood the fear. The way you understand rot inside a wall when you finally open it up, it doesn't excuse the damage, but you can see where it started. I didn't take anything that was yours, I said. I took what was mine. The difference is, you never understood there was a difference. She held my gaze for a long moment. No apology came. I did not expect one. She turned and walked down the stairs. I listened to her footsteps, slower than I had ever heard them. No click of heels this time. Just the quiet pad of flat shoes on old wood. I closed the door. Leaned my forehead against it. Breathed. Take a breath with me for a second. I need you to feel what this moment meant. 23 years. And it ended on a landing in Brooklyn with a woman in flat shoes and no bracelet. Tell me in the comments, and if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. 3 months later, I stood on a stage again. This time, no one called security. The National Trust for Historic Preservation held its annual gala in Washington, D.C., black tie, in a restored Beaux-Arts ballroom with ironwork ceilings and the kind of craftsmanship that makes you believe people once built things to last. I was there as a guest of honor. I had established a nonprofit using a portion of the trust funds. The Eleanor Hale Foundation, named for my mother, the architect no one had ever told me about, dedicated to restoring endangered historic buildings in underserved communities. Our first project, a community center in Baltimore. Built in 1912. Abandoned in 1987. Condemned in 2014. We were bringing it back. Load-bearing walls. Original tile. The whole skeleton saved. I wore an emerald green dress that night, simple, well-cut. My mother's pearl earrings. Behind me on the screen, in letters 6 feet tall. The Eleanor Hale Foundation. Preserving what matters. My father was in the audience. Front row. He had driven down from Westchester alone. No Vivian beside him. No entourage. Just James Caldwell in a navy suit, sitting upright, watching his daughter speak. I talked about buildings. About the ones everyone walks past without seeing. About the ones that get condemned because it is easier to tear something down than to do the hard, slow, unglamorous work of finding out what is still good underneath the surface. I talked about my mother. An architect I never knew was an architect. Who built things that held for decades because she understood that everything beautiful starts with structure. When I finished, the room stood. My father stood first. "Ah. I'm sorry, I need a moment." Afterward, he found me near the coat check. He was holding something, a flat rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. I opened it and went still. It was the architectural rendering I had given him at the retirement party. The original blueprint of his first building, the one I had restored from the county archive. He had it reframed in dark walnut with museum-quality glass. "It's been on my wall since the day you gave it to me," he said. I just never told Vivian. I held the frame against my chest and looked at this flawed, frightened, trying man. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." We walked out together into the cool D.C. night. 2 weeks later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address on the front. But I recognized the stationery immediately. Cassandra. 3 pages, front and back, in careful handwriting. An apology. Not the performative kind. Not the kind that explains itself away. The raw, stumbling, honest kind that a 26-year-old writes when she is seeing her life clearly for the very first time. I haven't replied yet. But the letter sits on my desk. Next to my mother's letter. Next to the compass box. Some things take time. Some buildings cannot be restored in a single season. But the foundation, the real one, the one beneath everything, is sound. So that is my story. I did not win because I screamed louder. I did not win because I had more money or more power or more cruelty than the people who tried to erase me. I won because 23 years ago, while she was dying, my mother sat down with a lawyer and a pen and a stack of legal paper and built something that would hold. She didn't do it with drama. She didn't do it with anger. She did it with structure. The same way she built everything. I used to think strength meant enduring. Sitting at the small table. Driving home in silence. Swallowing whatever was served and calling it family. I thought if I was just patient enough, quiet enough, good enough, someone would eventually see me. No one was going to see me. Not because I was invisible. But because the people around me had decided my invisibility was convenient for them. And the only person who could change that was the one standing in the mirror. If you are listening to this and something in it feels familiar, the whispers, the exclusion, your name misspelled on an invitation, your achievements met with silence while someone else's earn a standing ovation, I need you to know this. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not the difficult one. And you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. My mother left me a letter that said, "Find him." And what I found wasn't just a lawyer or a document or $17 million. I found the thing she had really been protecting all along. My right to take up space. Thank you, Mom. For the letter. For Daniel Hartley. For the pearls. For teaching me that some buildings are worth saving. Including the one I live in. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. If you are still here, if you stayed all the way through, you are exactly the kind of person who needed to hear this. And I am so glad you did.